6 months later, Elena stood in the observation lounge of the Use Harmony, humanity's first joint venture with the Void Seekers. Through the massive viewports, she watched construction crews from both species, working together to complete the most ambitious project either civilization had ever attempted. A dimensional research station that would serve as humanity's gateway to understanding the universe's hidden layers. Kethver approached from behind, his movements still causing small ripples in space-time that had become as familiar to Elena as her own heartbeat. The fragment's presence within him was no longer a source of chaos but a tool for exploration, allowing the research teams to study dimensional physics with unprecedented precision. "The Earth delegation has arrived," he reported, his voice carrying harmonics that human translators had learned to interpret as satisfaction. "They seem impressed by our progress, though several of their scientists appear to be questioning the theoretical foundations of dimensional engineering." Elena smiled. "Let them question. 6 months ago, they thought I was crazy for suggesting that cosmic horror might just be cosmic loneliness in disguise. Now we're on the verge of technologies that will revolutionize both our civilizations." She gestured toward the construction work outside. The station itself was a marvel of hybrid engineering, combining human adaptability with void-seeker dimensional manipulation. Where human designs favored modular construction and redundant systems, the aliens had contributed organic architecture that could reshape itself based on changing research needs. The result was something that looked like a living crystal growing in the depths of space. "The Earth scientists want to know about safety protocols," Elena continued. "They're having trouble accepting that direct contact with transdimensional entities can be not just safe, but beneficial." Kethver's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what Elena had learned indicated gentle amusement. "Your species has an interesting relationship with danger. You fear it intensely yet seek it out constantly. It makes you unpredictable in ways that even our most advanced behavioral models cannot account for." "That's because we don't think of it as danger when it's something worth doing," Elena replied. "We think of it as challenge." They were interrupted by Marcus, who approached carrying a data tablet and wearing the expression of someone who had been wrestling with impossible mathematics for too long. "Elena, I need you to look at these readings from the dimensional resonance chamber. The fragment's interaction with the test equipment is producing results that shouldn't be theoretically possible." Elena took the tablet and scanned the data streams. What she saw made her eyebrows raise in surprise. These energy readings suggest the fragment isn't just bridging dimensions. It's actually creating stable microportals between them. That should require the energy output of a small star. "That's what I thought too," Marcus said. "But when I ran the calculations again, I realized we've been thinking about this completely wrong. The fragment isn't generating the energy for dimensional travel. It's tapping into the energy that's already there, the zero-point fluctuations that exist everywhere in space-time." Kethver moved closer to examine the data, his forearms working in perfect coordination to manipulate the holographic displays. "This explains much about the fragment's behavior during my centuries of isolation. It was not trying to transform reality but to access the energy needed to return home. My people's containment field prevented it from reaching the necessary resonance frequencies." Elena felt a familiar excitement building as she considered the implications. "If we can map these zero-point energy patterns, we might be able to develop faster-than-light travel that doesn't require massive energy generation. Instead of fighting the laws of physics, we'd be using them more efficiently." "The Earth delegation is going to love that," Marcus said dryly. "Nothing makes politicians happier than the prospect of faster, cheaper space travel." Elena handed back the tablet and looked out at the construction work again. In the distance, she could see a Void Seeker ship approaching, its organic curves flowing through space like something alive. The sight still filled her with wonder, even after months of regular contact between the species. "Kethver, have your people's attitudes toward the fragment changed since our contact?" The aliens' patterns shifted to deeper, more complex colors that the translators interpreted as profound reflection. "The Council of Seekers has declared the exile ended. More than that, they have begun to understand that what they feared was not contamination but evolution. The fragment offers our species new ways of perceiving reality, new possibilities for growth beyond our current limitations. And the fragment itself? How does it feel about being welcomed instead of imprisoned? Kethver was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could sense him communicating with the transdimensional entity through channels that human science was only beginning to understand. It speaks of gratitude, though that word fails to capture the depth of its response. For the first time in its existence, it feels purpose rather than mere survival. It wishes to help both our species explore the hidden layers of the universe. Elena nodded, remembering the profound sense of connection she had felt during those first moments of contact. The fragment's loneliness had been so vast that it dwarfed human understanding. But so had its capacity for joy once that loneliness was ended. "Elena," Marcus said suddenly, "I'm reading something strange from the dimensional resonance chamber. The fragment's energy patterns are shifting in ways we haven't seen before." Elena and Kethva hurried to the nearest observation terminal. The chamber housed the most sophisticated dimensional monitoring equipment that human and void-seeker science could produce, designed to track the fragment's interactions with normal spacetime in real detail. What Elena saw on the displays made her catch her breath. "It's reaching out," she whispered. "The fragment is extending dimensional probes beyond our local spacetime." Kethver's forearms moved in rapid patterns as he interpreted the data through his connection with the fragment. It has detected others like itself, other fragments of the original entity, scattered across the galaxy by the same cosmic event that separated this piece from its home dimension. Elena felt her heart racing as she realized what this meant. "How many others?" "Dozens," Kethver replied, his voice filled with wonder. "Perhaps hundreds. Some are bound to host organisms as I was. Others drift free in deep space, causing the dimensional anomalies that your scientists have classified as natural phenomena." "And they're all lonely," Elena said softly. "All searching for connection and understanding that they've never been able to find." Marcus was already running calculations on the energy requirements for long-range dimensional communication. If we can establish contact with the other fragments, we could help them find stable host relationships instead of causing random transformations. This could solve dimensional anomaly problems across the entire galaxy. Elena looked out at the stars, trying to imagine the scope of what they were discovering. Hundreds of ancient, lonely entities scattered across vast distances, each one carrying the potential for incredible advancement or terrible destruction depending on how they were approached. It was exactly the kind of impossible challenge that humanity specialized in. "Kethver, how long would it take to modify our research station for long-range dimensional communication?" The alien consulted with the fragment through their shared connection. "With the current design, perhaps 6 months to achieve reliable contact with the nearest fragments." "But Elena, you should understand the implications of what you are proposing." "Each fragment will need to be approached individually, with careful attention to its specific needs and fears. Some may have been isolated for even longer than I was." "Then we'd better get started," Elena said firmly. "No one should have to be alone for 700 years just because they're different." Marcus shook his head with familiar resignation. "Here we go again." Elena decides to solve a galaxy-wide problem with optimism and stubbornness. "It worked before," Elena pointed out. "That's what worries me," Marcus replied. But he was all ready. Pulling up the station's design specifications on his tablet. Elena watched the construction crews outside working to complete humanity's first dimensional research station. When she had first answered that distress signal, she had thought she was investigating a simple rescue situation. Instead, she had discovered that the universe was full of lonely entities, waiting for someone brave enough to reach out and touch them. It was exactly the kind of discovery that would keep human explorers busy for centuries. The fragment within Kethver pulsed with anticipation as it sensed others of its kind, beginning to respond to their long-range probes. Across the galaxy, ancient loneliness was about to meet human determination to help anyone who needed it. Elena pressed her hand against the viewport, watching the stars and thinking about all the untouchable beings. Who might be waiting in the darkness for someone to prove that no one had to remain isolated forever? The universe was vast and strange and full of wonders that defied understanding, but it didn't have to be lonely. Kethver, she said quietly, when we make contact with the other fragments, I want to be part of the first communication attempt. The aliens' patterns shifted to warm colors of friendship and Elena spent the next 18 hours in her ship's laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing quantum field equations and dimensional theory that pushed human science to its absolute limits. Marcus worked beside her, his face growing more concerned with each calculation they completed. Elena, these readings are insane, he said for the 10th time. The energy requirements alone would drain our entire power grid in seconds. And that's assuming our equipment could even generate the kind of fields you're talking about. Elena rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the data streams flowing across her screens. The fragment inside Kethver existed partially outside normal spacetime, which explained why conventional containment had failed. But there might be another approach, something that required thinking about the problem in a completely different way. What if we're approaching this wrong? She muttered. What if instead of trying to contain the fragment, we tried to stabilize it? Stabilize how? We don't even understand what this thing is. Elena pulled up the sensor readings from Kethver's containment field. Look at these patterns. The energy field isn't just keeping the fragment contained, it's keeping it in constant tension between dimensions. Like stretching a piece of metal until it's about to snap. No wonder the system is failing. She began running new calculations, this time focusing on harmonic resonance rather than brute force containment. If the fragment needed to exist partially outside normal space, maybe the solution wasn't to fight that tendency but to control it. Elena, even if this works in theory, we don't have the equipment to generate quantum resonance fields. Our ship is designed for stellar observation, not experimental dimensional physics. Elena smiled grimly. We don't need to generate the fields. We need to modify the ones that already exist. She pulled up the technical specifications for Kethver's containment system. The alien technology was incredibly sophisticated, but it followed recognizable principles. With some creative modifications using their own equipment, it might be possible to change the field's function entirely. You want to hack alien technology that we barely understand to perform an experimental procedure that has never been tested, Marcus said slowly. On a being whose physiology could kill us if we make even a small mistake. That's about the size of it. Yes, Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head with what might have been admiration or despair. This is why humans are going to either conquer the galaxy or get themselves extinct within the next century. There's no middle ground with our species. Elena was already gathering the equipment they would need. Portable field generators, quantum resonance modulators, and her personal favorite tool for impossible situations, a jury-rigged containment suit that had been designed for working inside stellar cores. If it could protect her from the interior of a star, it might just keep her alive during direct contact with cosmic horror when they returned to Kethver's ship. The alien greeted them with what their translator interpreted as surprise and concern. You have returned. I had hoped you would flee while there was still time. The containment field has degraded further since your departure. I estimate perhaps 36 hours before complete failure. Elena began setting up her equipment around the containment field, ignoring Kethver's increasingly worried questions. We're not fleeing. We're going to fix this. Human Elena, you do not understand the nature of what you are attempting. The fragment within me has already transformed my cellular structure beyond recognition. Direct contact will do the same to you, but you lack my species' natural resistance to dimensional instability. The transformation will destroy your neural pathways within moments. Maybe, Elena said, calibrating the field generators. Or maybe human neural pathways are different enough from yours that will react differently to the transformation. Kethver's bioluminescent. Patterns shifted to colors that the translator couldn't interpret, though Elena suspected they indicated something like horror. You cannot be serious. You would risk dimensional transformation based on theoretical differences in brain chemistry? Elena looked up from her equipment and met the alien's gaze through the shimmering energy field. Kethver, you've been alone for 700 years to protect the universe from something you never chose to carry. You've sacrificed everything for the safety of beings who exiled you rather than try to help you. That's not justice, and it's not right. Humans have a saying, no one fights alone. She began the startup sequence for the field modulators, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The plan was insane even by human standards, but it was also elegantly simple. Instead of fighting the fragment's transdimensional nature, she would harmonize with it. Elena, this is suicide, Marcus said through the cum from his position at the safety controls. If this goes wrong, I'm under orders to evacuate both of us immediately. If this goes wrong, there might not be time to evacuate, Elena replied. Just monitor the field harmonics and be ready to adjust the resonance frequency if I lose consciousness. The field generators hummed to life around the containment area, creating overlapping energy patterns that made the air itself shimmer like heat waves. Elena's specially modified containment suit would provide some protection, but she was essentially betting her life on theoretical physics and human stubbornness. The field modulation is beginning, she announced, watching the readings on her displays. Kethver, I need you to move as close to the containment barrier as possible. When I reduce the field strength, we'll have maybe seconds before the transformation effect becomes uncontrolled. Kethver moved with fluid grace to the edge of his energy prison. Human Elena, if you survive this, know that your courage honors both our species. If you do not, know that I will carry the memory of your sacrifice for whatever time remains to me. Elena activated the field modulators and began the carefully calculated process of altering the containment field's harmonic frequency. Instead of blocking the fragment's dimensional effects, the modified field would channel them into controlled patterns. Like turning chaotic electricity into a steady current, the first change was in the air, around Kethver's containment area. Reality seemed to ripple, like looking through water, and Elena's instruments registered energy patterns that had no equivalent in human science. The fragment was responding to the harmonic modification, its chaotic dimensional fluctuations beginning to stabilize into regular patterns. It's working, Marcus reported, his voice tight with tension. The dimensional distortion is becoming coherent. But Elena, the power requirements are massive. We've got maybe 10 minutes before our generators overload. Elena nodded and reached for the containment field controls. This was the moment of truth. She would reduce the barrier strength just enough to allow physical contact, trusting that the harmonic stabilization would prevent uncontrolled transformation. Kethver reached toward the field edge. When I give the signal, extend one hand through the barrier. Move slowly and stop immediately if you feel the fragment's energy becoming unstable. The alien's forearms moved in complex patterns that Elena recognized as either prayer or preparation for death. Possibly both. I am ready, human Elena. May your gods watch over us both. Elena reduced the containment field's strength by exactly 12%, creating a small gap in the energy barrier just large enough for careful contact. The dimensional distortion around the gap swirled like a miniature galaxy, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Kethver slowly extended one hand through the opening. His skin was deep blue-black with veins of silver that pulsed with inner light. Elena could see the fragment's energy patterns flowing beneath the surface like living lightning. But the harmonic field was keeping it stable. Elena reached out with her own hand. Protected by the containment suit, but still vulnerable to forces that human science barely understood. The distance between them was less than a meter, but it felt like crossing a void between universes. Their hands touched. The universe exploded into sensation unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. She felt her consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of her physical brain, touching dimensions that existed alongside reality but remained invisible to normal perception. Through Kethver's transformed nervous system, she experienced the fragment directly. It wasn't malevolent, she realized with shock. It was lost, The fragment was a piece of something vast and ancient that had become separated from its origin point during the universe's earliest moments. For billions of years, it had drifted between dimensions, seeking to return home but unable to navigate the barriers between realities. It had bound itself to Kethver not out of hostility, but out of desperate loneliness. Elena felt the aliens' amazement through their shared contact. In 700 years, he had never been able to communicate with the fragment directly, only experience its effects on his physiology. But human neural pathways, it seemed, were chaotic enough to serve as a translation medium between the fragment's transdimensional nature and normal spacetime. "I can understand it," Elena gasped through the suit's communication system. "It's not trying to transform reality. It's trying to get home." Through the touch contact, she felt Kethver's consciousness joining with her own, and together they reached out to the fragment with compassion. The research station orbited a dying star, its metal corridors echoing with the hum of life. Support systems that had worked without rest for 300 years. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced window, watching the red giant pulse in the distance like a cosmic heartbeat. She had come here to study stellar collapse, but what she found instead would change everything she thought she knew about alien contact. "Another supply drop delayed," came a voice behind her. Marcus Chun, her research partner, floated over in the low-gravity section, his magnetic boots clicking against the deck plating. "The brass back on Earth says we're not priority anymore. Apparently, studying dead stars doesn't bring in funding like it used to." Elena turned away from the hypnotic sight of the dying sun. "Maybe it's time we found something more interesting than stellar death cycles." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. The distress signal came 3 days later, weak and stuttering through the cosmic background radiation. Most automated systems would have filtered it out as noise, but Elena had modified their sensors to catch even the faintest electromagnetic whispers from the surrounding space. The signal pattern was unlike anything in the human databases. "It's artificial," Marcus confirmed, running the data through every analysis program they had. "Definitely not natural phenomenon. The mathematical structure is too complex, too organized. Someone's out there, and they're in trouble." The source was an asteroid field roughly 6 hours away at maximum burn. Elena made the decision before Marcus could object. They had been sitting in this research station for 8 months with nothing but red giant measurements to show for it. First contact with an alien species, even a distressed one, would justify their entire mission. The research vessel Curiosity was built for stellar observation, not rescue operations, but Elena pushed the small ship's engines harder than she probably should have. The asteroid field loomed ahead of them, chunks of rock and ice tumbling in chaotic orbits around a gravitational center that registered as massive but invisible to their sensors. "There," Marcus pointed at the tactical display. "Something metallic, about 2 kilometers into the field? It's big, maybe the size of a cruiser." The alien ship hung motionless between 2 massive asteroids, its hull a deep purple that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No running lights, no engine emissions, no signs of life except for that steady distress signal. Elena had seen crashed vessels before, but this one looked different. It looked deliberate, as if someone had chosen this hiding place carefully. "Atmospheric readings?" she asked. Marcus ran the scans. "Breathable, actually. Nitrogen-oxygen mix, slightly higher pressure than Earth normal. Temperature readings are ... strange. Most of the ship reads cold. Like space cold, but there's one section showing normal life support temperatures." Elena was already reaching for her EVA suit. "Prep the shuttle. Whatever's over there, they've been waiting a long time for help." The docking procedure took longer than expected. The alien ship's hull was smooth, almost organic in appearance, with no obvious airlocks or entry points. Elena had to use cutting tools to create their own access point, the metal parting with a sound like breaking glass even in the vacuum inside. The corridors were too tall and too narrow for human comfort, clearly designed for beings with a different body structure. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow that made shadows dance in Elena's peripheral vision. The air tasted metallic through her suit's filters, but scans confirmed it was safe to breathe. The life signs are coming from the central chamber, Marcus reported through the com. Biosignature is unlike anything in our databases, but definitely alive. Heart rate equivalent is elevated, consistent with distress. They followed the corridor toward the ship's center, their magnetic boots echoing strangely in the alien architecture. Elena noticed that every surface was perfectly smooth, as if the entire ship had been grown rather than built. There were no seams, no bolts, no obvious mechanical joints. It reminded her of the inside of a shell. The central chamber was vast, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above their heads. In the center stood something that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. It was a containment field of some kind, shimmering with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Inside the field, barely visible through the distortion, was a figure. The alien was tall and graceful, with 4 arms that moved in perfect coordination. Its skin appeared to be a deep blue-black like the space between stars, and patterns of bioluminescent spots traced lines across its form like living constellations. But what struck Elena most was how utterly alone it appeared, standing motionless in the center of the energy cage. "Hello?" Elena called out, her voice translator cycling through various frequency modulations. "Can you understand me? We received your distress signal." The alien's head turned toward them with fluid motion. When it spoke, the words came through their translators as perfectly clear English, though Elena could hear the underlying harmonics that suggested a completely different vocal structure. "You should not have come here," the alien said, and there was infinite sadness in its voice. "I am Kethver of the Void Seekers, and I am forbidden. No living being has touched me in 700 of your years. No one ever will again." Elena stepped closer to the containment field, ignoring Marcus's worried warnings behind her. "What do you mean, forbidden? Who put you in this prison?" Kethver's 4 arms moved in what might have been a gesture of resignation. "Prison is not the right word. This is protection. My people discovered too late that I carry something within me, something that no living creature can survive contact with. The energy field keeps others safe from what I have become." "What kind of contamination?" Marcus asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "Biological? Radiological? Our sensors aren't detecting any dangerous emissions?" "Not contamination," Kethver replied. "Transformation. In my youth, I explored the deep void between galaxies, places where reality grows thin and other dimensions bleed through. I found something there, or perhaps it found me. Now I carry a fragment of that otherness within my being. Direct contact with my living tissue causes ... changes in other biological entities, changes that cannot be undone." Elena studied the energy field more closely. It was incredibly sophisticated, maintaining a perfect barrier that allowed air and sound to pass through but prevented any physical contact. The technology was far beyond human capability, yet here was this magnificent being trapped within it like a specimen in a laboratory. "How long have you been alone?" she asked softly. Kethver's bioluminescent patterns shifted to darker hues. "Time loses meaning in isolation. I have watched 17 stars die in the distance. I have seen the birth of nebulae and the collision of asteroids that were once planets. My ship's systems calculate that I have been alone for approximately 700 Earth years, though I no longer trust such measurements." The magnitude of that isolation hit Elena like a physical blow. 700 years of complete solitude, unable to touch or be touched by any living thing. It was a kind of torture that no human could truly comprehend. "Your distress signal?" Marcus said. "If you're too dangerous for contact, why call for help?" For the first time, something like hope flickered in Kethver's voice. "Because I am dying. The containment field requires constant maintenance, and my ship's power systems are failing. I have perhaps days before the barrier collapses. When that happens, the fragment of otherness within me will be released into this dimension. Your science fiction stories speak of cosmic horror, but they do not capture the reality. This universe is not meant to contain what I carry." Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. "What happens if the containment fails?" Everything within several light years will be transformed, Kethver said simply. Matter will take on properties that violate your physics. Space itself will become different, hostile to life as you understand it. My people chose exile over execution because they hoped someday a solution might be found. They were optimistic. Elena looked at the failing power readings on her scanner. The alien was right. The systems keeping the containment field stable were failing rapidly. They had maybe 72 hours before whatever cosmic horror Kethver carried within him was unleashed on this section of space. There has to be something we can do, she said, though she had no idea what that might be. Some way to help you. Kethver's patterns shifted to colors that the translator interpreted as gentle amusement. You are kind, human Elena, but there is nothing that can be done. I have accepted my fate long ago. I only hope that when the end comes, it will be quick. But Elena had not come this far, had not made first contact with an alien species, only to watch them die in the cold of space. There had to be an answer, some solution that 700 years of solitude had prevented Kethver from seeing. Humans were good at impossible problems. They specialized in finding ways around limitations that other species considered absolute. Tell me about this fragment, she said. How exactly does it affect living tissue? Kethver's forearms moved in complex patterns as he explained. The fragment existed partially outside normal space-time, creating localized distortions in reality wherever it made contact with organized matter. Livin,